Welcome to the Eating at a Meeting podcast. I'm your host, Tracy Stuckrath, dietary needs expert, certified meetings manager, certified food protection manager. I have searched the globe to find people and businesses who are creating safe, sustainable, and inclusive food and beverage experiences for their employees, guests, and communities. In each episode, you will find authentic conversations about how food and beverage impacts inclusion, sustainability, culture, community, health, and wellness. I know that sounds like a lot, but we're going to cover it all. Are you ready to feed engagement, nourish inclusion, and bolster your bottom line? If so, let's go. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Eating at a Meeting. I have brought my new friend here, Aubrey Alvarez, who I met at the La Dames d'Escoffier conference in New York City last month, and that's a mouthful. And Aubrey, is the co-founder and executive director for Eat Greater Des Moines in Des Moines, Iowa. And Eat Greater Des Moines was founded in 2013 to support people and projects that move our food systems forward for everyone.
Yes.
Hi, Aubrey.
Hi. I'm so happy to be here.
I'm so happy to be here too, to have you here. Sarah and I were so excited to meet you when we were in New York, and especially when we were talking about ways that we could rescue or recover some food at the event we were attending, but in just general and what our association does. So
yeah. And no one likes throwing away good food. So
no.
I always appreciate finding more, especially amazing women in food, and then talking about how we can make sure it doesn't go to waste.
Exactly. So and this wasn't anything that I said earlier or asked you earlier, but my friend Sarah just showed up. Hello, Sarah. Hi. But I like the end of that statement. It says to move our food system forward for everyone. What does that mean?
I think even when I first started or interviewed for this job, and during the interview, they said, what are your thoughts? How do you feel about our local food system? And I was like, I don't know what you're talking about when you say that. I grew up in Iowa. There was a farm behind my house, but I didn't grow up on a farm. And I think I just made a lot of assumptions about how food was accessible and where food came from here, and that everyone just had access to what they wanted and needed. And, that's really, I think the food system's been broken for a while. And really, I think the pandemic helped kind of really lift up and let people see that not only is the food system broken, that we have hunger in, the United States, and we have people who are living in cities and living in communities who don't have access to a grocery store and who don't have enough to eat. So, I think really what we saw with the pandemic is more people just jumping in and saying, I want to be a part of the change. And, that's really what I'm hoping we'll see more of, because, there was just more access to food. There were more resources. There were more people, whether it was SNAP benefits or just the emergency aid, but also just more restaurants and places who were, kind of converting their kitchens to get food out in a different way. And I think that's really recognizing that not everyone can just drive to a grocery store or drive to a restaurant and get what they need, I think is not okay anywhere here, and especially not, here. And so how can we make sure that no matter where you are, you have enough to eat, and it's something that's good for your body and your soul?
Well, and I'm glad that you pointed that out, because even yesterday I went to one of my farmer friends, Shank Family Farms, and I helped them process chickens, which I know. Everybody's like, you did what?
I've done that. It's an experience.
Yes, it is an experience, and it's a small family farm, and there were 6 of us there doing it, from they raise the chickens and, processing them all the way through. But, husband and wife family farmers, and then another 2 gentlemen that have another farm that I buy vegetables from. But we were talking about our farmers market, and there's only like 4 to 5 farmers there.
Oh,
and the rest of it's arts and crafts. And I'm like, the sign out says farmers market.
Yeah.
Right. And Rachel said to me, she's like, we're kind of in a food desert out here.
Yeah.
And in Eastern North Carolina. And you don't really think about that if you have the grocery stores, right? And people go to those, and we have everything from Piggly Wiggly to Food Lion to Harris Teeter to Publix. But access to local, like right there in your face farms is not really there.
No. Well, and I grew up, in going to even our local grocery stores, I just assumed that those vegetables, that the chicken, that all of the food I was getting at our grocery store came from farmers near me.
Right.
And
Yeah.
it was not until recently, in the last 10 to 15 years, I was like, oh, that didn't come here. And there's actually for those farmers in Iowa too that are trying to grow food or raise chickens and have that be their business, it is very hard and the system is not set up for you to be successful. So that's where a lot of our work with in food deserts, and I've actually learned a new term. We're actually trying to talk more about because food desert makes it sound like deserts happen naturally. Right. These places didn't happen naturally. There's no food there for a reason. And so we've been working on trying to put food. One of our first projects was a pop-up produce program. And we focused, it was kind of like a mini farmers market, but they were in smaller communities that didn't have a grocery store. And your only option was to get, if it was a Wednesday and you needed something quick, was to go to a local gas station or convenience store. Right. So, those weren't necessarily about need, as of, I think sometimes when we talk about food access, people are like, oh, this is for, the needy people or those who, are struggling. No, this is for anybody who needs some fresh produce on a Wednesday. Like that's for everybody. So, I think that's the other big part of our work is really looking at food for everybody and not, well, this is for, only this group of people can have this and these people can have that. Like, no, we all deserve to have good quality food.
Well, and I think that's really important. And it reminds me of when I lived in Atlanta and one of the farmers markets actually started working with MARTA, which is the train system,
Love it.
To put some markets at the train stations in communities that potentially might not have the access to where the other farmers markets are because the trains don't go there or they don't have transportation. And I love that because even here, I mean, where I am in New Bern, we don't have public transportation. So if you want to get to these markets or you definitely, or anywhere, you have to have a car.
Yeah. Well, and that's, I think the next step for us was with the markets. And that's really, I know I talked with you and Sarah about it. We're community refrigerators, and that's kind of that next step of, we can put food in places, but we also need to make sure that it's able to be stored safely and that it's going to be good for a while. And so we've really seen more of these community refrigerators, I think a lot of times too, because Des Moines an urban area, part of the state, but of the rest of our region, we have suburban and very rural parts. And, I think that's what's been really exciting for us is to see these community refrigerators become part of the community and that the communities who takes care of them and they're putting in really good food, and that's, the fresh fruits and vegetables. And when people's gardens have, you have too much zucchini, that's a great spot to take it. And it's really been amazing to see really, and that's what the beauty of these fridges are, is it's the community taking care of it. And it's not only for, I think we've tried to move away from it looking like, well, this is just for those in need. Well, do you need some eggs? All right. That's enough for me. You can have them.
Well, and so we had somebody, I was telling somebody about that the other day, and they're like, well, what about the health inspectors and such? And I know Sarah's researching it here for North Carolina, and Sarah Cooney's my board member on LaDoms in North Carolina. But if it's community read and run and by the neighborhoods, you don't need to have all of those different certifications.
No. I've really kind of likened these community refrigerators to like the break room in your office. Okay. So, refrigerators in my break room aren't regulated by any sort of health, they're there and everyone uses them. But we also, if someone has a meeting and they're like, oh, we have all of these, it's usually like bagels is usually what there is. We have all of these left over. Could you use some? Would anyone like to eat them? That's it. And I know that if I'm eating some of these leftovers, they're like, thank you. I didn't want to throw them away. And I also am able to, use the refrigerator. So we look at community refrigerators the same way. And I think a lot of times we do get the question about like, well, what about safety? And so I always like to go a little bit farther and be like, so what exactly are you worried about? What safety piece are you concerned about? And generally what we've gotten is, well, what if someone, tries to poison someone? And my response to that is, has that been happening? Like, have we been having a rash of poisons happening around? Because what's to say that that can't happen anywhere that there's food? Why would that be only at a community refrigerator? So, and I like to go by, it's good to know what the risks are, but I also, that's why we have guidelines with the fridges, that it needs to be appropriately packaged. It needs to be marked. It needs to have, what are the allergen kinds of things on it.
Yay!
Yeah. And so that anyone who's getting from the fridge too, there's autonomy. You can grab what you can grab it if you want it, or you don't have to. And there's plenty of times if I show up and maybe there's like some bag salad that is gone a little too far, I'll just throw it away. I think that's the part we keep forgetting with some of this stuff is just let also like people make decisions on their own. So if it doesn't look right, it doesn't smell right, it wasn't packaged, throw it in the garbage. But, 9 times out of 10, these are a huge asset and benefit to everybody in the community. And so that's why we started our first one helped start. We don't run any community refrigerators. We're kind of, I call myself like the chief hype person that's like, yes, you should do it. We'll buy you a fridge. We'll get you started. And then if it's going to be successful, it's going to be successful because of the people in the neighborhood. And after starting the first one, December 2020, we now have almost 40. And,
wow.
And they're successful because they're still there and they're still running. The beauty of it is if something isn't working, if we put one we have a lot in refrigerator or in libraries, we have them in hotels and,
really
Head Start programs. Yeah. Anywhere there's people, we want to put a fridge. And luckily, if it doesn't work, it's a fridge. You just move it. You just take it somewhere else. We're not like building anything. So if it doesn't work, move it. But we haven't had to do that, and I think that's a testament to the community's really ownership of making sure that it is successful because they're the ones filling it, cleaning it, and using it.
And that's really important because even I, when I was in corporate and we had the refrigerators, I'm like, sometimes they got nasty and we need to make sure. And there was one client that I worked temporarily on site for, and their refrigerator says, on Friday, anything that's left in here will get thrown away because it is the clean day, right? And every Friday they cleaned it. So, which I like.
That's been a big part of, for the refrigerators. I think there's a lot of different volunteer opportunities. There's obviously those who are purchasing food to go in the fridge. There's those who are picking up food recovery to put in the fridge. But there's also volunteers who sign up to check on the fridge every day and clean clean stuff, pick up messes, and just make sure that it looks nice. I think, and that's really how, these fridges, the other thing is, they're not being vandalized. They're not being broken. Things aren't being destroyed because it's valued. It's something that's seen as something that everybody, I've gone a few times and seen someone who's taking food, but they came back and they're like, oh, well, something spilled in here. So I wanted to come back and clean it up. And I think, that's awesome. The kind of stuff that, you put something out there and you hope that it's, going to be something that, folks rally around. And that's really what's happened because the fridges go where people want them. We're not just dropping off fridges around town. It sounds like fun to just drive around in our truck and like leave fridges. But we have not done that yet. There's plenty of people who want one. And so we're starting with them first.
Okay, so let's jump to food rescue. And I want to really, can you, before you can tell us how people can get involved, can you just describe what that means and then what Eat Greater Des Moines does?
Yes. So food rescue, I will say too, when I started Eat Greater Des Moines and took this job almost 10 years ago, I wasn't familiar with food rescue either. I think everyone can appreciate, going to an event or even at a grocery store. I like to say anywhere there's food, there's a food rescue opportunity, because I think we can all recognize, if you've been to an event or planned an event, trying to figure out how to make sure everyone gets fed and then you not have too much is impossible. And, just challenging. And even, catering, no one wants the last person to have the last piece of chicken. So they overproduce so that there's this look of abundance. Food rescue is just making sure that food that's still perfectly good. If someone would have walked through that line later, they would have served that chicken as it is. No one was there, but it's still perfectly good. Food rescue is the process of getting that food and taking it somewhere where it will be consumed. So a lot of the food, like I said, food rescue is any food that is still edible, but doesn't have a purpose where it's at. So either it's an event location. Yeah. Well, and I'm sure someone else made it up and I just get to repeat it. So that's why it could be an event location. If you're an event location, you have new groups coming in. You're not someone that can turn it into a soup or put something on special. Right. Same thing with grocery stores. I think what's changed over the last, few years is we're used to a look of abundance. Everyone goes in and you're used to seeing full shelves. It wasn't until, the pandemic that people were like, no toilet paper. And we actually saw empty shelves. That's not common. So, and really a lot of times that food, it's not being moved or thrown away because it's old. It's just being thrown away because they have more that needs to take its place. So, food rescue is really just trying to take all of that food that's still perfectly edible and make sure that it gets eaten and not thrown in the garbage. And unfortunately, we're not doing very good at it. There is a lot of, when you look at, how much food is wasted, the estimates of 30 to 40% of everything that's produced ends up in the garbage instead of in people's stomachs. It's ridiculous. And I think that's at the same time how you can have 1 in 6 kids not having enough to eat while at the same time you're throwing away millions of pounds of perfectly good food. It just doesn't make sense. That said, it's not easy. Our system right now is not set up for food rescue generally to be a part of the plan. And so that's really why Eat Greater Des Moines, our role, we don't serve any people directly. Our role is really just to work to make those who have food, it's easier for them to find a place where it can go, and those who need it to just get it. So, that's really the role. And there's not all things can go all places. I like to use a lasagna. If you have a lasagna, you can't a food pantry is not a real good spot for that, because people are going to a pantry to pick up groceries. They're going to get items to make their own lasagna. But a lasagna does have a home. It's just maybe at a place where they're, a shelter or a meal site or an apartment complex or, somewhere where it needs ready to eat. So all of that food has a home. It just takes a little work to make that connection. And then our hope is once that connection's made, that's just the new process, For all of these things, it's hard the first few times, but then once you change your process, that's just how you do it now. So that's really where we're trying to get to, is that food rescue and food recovery is just part of what we do. And it's not an add-on or a bonus or a nice to have. It's just, why would you throw away perfectly good food?
Right. Well, and I like the distinction that you gave, is that like a food bank is where you're going to get groceries that you're going to make yourself. And then food rescue with already prepared food that's time and temperature controlled. I just want to give people that caveat there. That's the food safety aspect of it, that it's going to somebody that can actually eat it upon receiving it. Or, there's some organizations in Vegas, they were now working with the food bank to flash freeze food so they can give it at a later date, right? And the food bank actually has the capability of storing that frozen food, right?
That'd be incredible. Well, a flash freezer, the things that I thought I would be dreaming about getting someday. Did not see flash freezer on the list, or a forklift. That's the other thing I've really been dreaming about lately. So things are weird when you get old, I guess. But you do bring up, I think the food safety part is definitely a piece that always makes people nervous, rightfully so. I think that's also what's important with food rescue is we're working with food professionals. we're working with people that are in kitchens or, that have also, they wanted this food to be eaten and prepared and like kept it safe. So,
Right.
that's really why with a lot of this food that we're capturing, it is really good food. It's
Oh, yeah.
been either ready to serve and then it goes into a fridge. And a lot of times we're picking it up straight from the fridge and it gets to where it's going in 30 minutes to an hour. And then it's eaten within 24 hours. So, I think that's the other thing to think about is sometimes, you might think of your own pantry or your own, refrigerator. And for example, one of our convenience stores that donates all of their ready to eat food. So it's their fresh
Mhm.
meat sandwiches or the cheeseburger in the hot case, so those kinds of things. Their policy is that they don't sell any of that after 72 hours. And
Okay.
so my fridge, I'm positive what my kids ate last night was well over 72 hours old, but it's fine. I get though, from a business perspective, if you're going to sell it for $5, you want it to be, peak quality, but there's nothing wrong with it. But we also recognize it doesn't have long. So we need to get
Right.
it somewhere. It doesn't have time to go get picked up, get taken somewhere, put into inventory, ordered, delivered, and then go out. So that's really
Right.
why food rescue and the perishable food rescue that we focus on, the food gets picked up from where it is and it goes directly to where it's going to be served so that it can be eaten that day or the next, because we don't have time to, we need to move it quickly and
Right.
make sure that it's going to be eaten and not sitting on a shelf.
Well, so you're like the conduit between the person who's making the food as well as the person who's serving the food, right?
Yes.
Making sure that it gets to one place to the other. And I think one of the cool things that you instituted I think, was it last year or this year, is that
Mhm.
drivers, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So tell us about that.
So, within food recovery, kind of one of the first big barriers is just getting the place to say yes, just to
Right.
agree to do it. But
We're going to come back to that
yeah, oh,
conversation.
good. Well, and then the next part is getting the food picked up. I think nobody, whether it's on the food donor side, they don't have extra staff and capacity to deliver the food at the end of the
Mhm.
day. At the same time, we don't have, whether it's a food pantry or a meal site or a school or a daycare, they're also not sitting on a bunch of capacity to just send people to go pick up this food anytime. And so that's really a role that Eat Greater Des Moines tried to step into and make easier. So we started in April of 2018 a paid driver program where we hired drivers. We actually partnered with our local Wesley Life Meals on Wheels program. So the crew that goes around, over the lunch hour and delivers meals to seniors and those unable to leave their homes. So we had, they already had a fleet of vehicles and they had drivers, and it was a win-win situation. If they were able to maximize their fleet and we had a way to get food moved. So that was really one of our biggest kind of steps into that direction to fill that transportation gap. And, it's been incredible. Unfortunately, I believe that work is work and it's labor and it should be compensated. So I always kind of liken it to no one puts out their recycling can and is like, oh, I hope that volunteer shows up. No, we pay for that because we
Mhm.
want someone to show up when they said they're going to show up. And if something, that there's accountability there. But for some reason, with something as important and valuable as food, we're like, well, we'll just hope get a couple of volunteers and hope they show up, which they've done an incredible job, but it's too much for, volunteers, that system to be completely built on volunteers. So
Right.
we did that for 4 years. And my hope was always that one of our food donors would recognize the value in it and invest in keeping that program sustainable. That didn't happen. Surprise. So, unfortunately, that's kind of where we're at just policy wise with food recovery is there's benefits and incentives for food donors to donate the food, but they don't have to. And if you do, you're going to get the tax benefit, but you don't have to, there's no one's paying for it really. So
Right.
I was being very hopeful. So unfortunately, we did have to pivot, but we partnered, and actually 412 Food Rescue, which is based out of Pittsburgh, had technology that they created called Food Rescue Hero that really makes it easy for people who want to help pick up and deliver food, do that simply. So we started using this software in June and had over 700 people sign up already.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
It's incredible. And, I'm saying, we can't build this whole system on volunteers. The other part of this is there's, here we have 500 different groceries and convenience stores in our region. That's a lot. Right. So just managing all of the details were really complicated with that. And really the software, because it was built by a food rescue organization, takes into account all of those, just, food rescue at the base of it is relationships. It's relationships between whoever's picking up the food and whoever has it. So, that's been really exciting because we're seeing, people who are just, I love food rescue. I'm probably a little biased, but people are excited when you pick it up. They're excited to see you. You get in your car and you drop it off, and they're excited when you drop it off. So, we see a lot of parents and kids doing it together, or, a lot of, people who might be retired and have extra time to go and, pick up maybe 4 or 5 places. And this makes it so that they're not working with just one nonprofit. They're working and picking up and delivering food to, we have 250 different locations we take food to. And so it really is spreading out that volunteer capacity amongst all of these organizations that need food delivered to them without really, making it any one entity's. We're taking that on because we're not serving any people. We can take on that volunteer part. And it's been really exciting to see how many people have stepped up. And then that allows us to do those rescues that don't fit in someone's car, someone picking up from like Trader Joe's, actually that is going, but some of the bigger ones that end up and don't fit in someone's Mini Cooper.
Well, and that's what I drive. So,
well, that's what our Wesley Life drivers actually use Mini Coopers initially. So that was a whole logistical challenge of, I will tell you, you can fit 8 totes in a Mini Cooper.
Well, and when I used to go to Home Depot to malt to my house, I could fit 20 bags. And the guys at Home Depot were like, you're going to ruin your car. I'm like, did you ever watch The Italian Job?
How exactly.
They put
I'm fine. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, exactly. 20 bags is nothing. But yeah, I mean, it does. And which Mini Cooper you have could potentially mean, you could get more in it than a normal one.
Exactly. So, and it's been great because, we have people are just able to sign up and do what works with their schedule, and they can sign up for once a week or, one-time kinds of things. So it's really been, this just launched a few months ago, and I think we've been really excited just with the outpouring of interest and support. And now really our biggest obstacle is to get more of the food that's sitting out there.
Okay, so that's a great segue into that conversation. So, I mean, I worked in an event in April, and when we were meeting in January, well, we don't do that. And as I put in the description of this session, is a friend of mine's, it was in their contract with the hotel, and the hotel just kept pushing it off. And about 2 weeks out, they're like, please don't make us do this. And I know it's that fear from, I'm going to say it from the lawyer side of the hotels, they're going to get sued. So I want to talk about, that, but also the Bill Emerson, all the things that are rolled into that. So can you just spew it out?
Yes. So, and I will say the first time I asked about food rescue was on an event. It was a catered event at, local casino, and there were all these plated meals. And I asked, what's happening with that food now? The event's over. And, the woman said, oh, we have to throw it away because, health law. I was like, no, health, I'm not a lawyer. That's a bummer. So luckily, one of my first meetings was actually with an organization that does food recovery. And I asked them about, what's this health law that people are talking about? And that was when I first learned about the Bill Emerson Good Samaritan Act that was passed in 1996. And that law was passed to protect donors from any civil or criminal liabilities when they donate food in good faith. So, I think people heard that we want to do the right thing, but we're worried. And what if something happens? And there's a lot of very litigious folks running all over the place. But luckily, this isn't a space where people are trying to be litigious, because the law was passed in 1996. But the university, I think it was University of Arkansas Law School, did a case review to find out how many times have people had to use this act or this, law to protect themselves. Zero.
Yeah.
So let's find a new reason why places aren't participating, because it's not really legality. Right. Is it because you just don't want to? Because it's hard? That could be it.
I think that's a big one.
I think it's because it's different. I think obviously in all of these places, they are doing a lot and trying, you have your processes, you have a lot of different people coming in and out and doing things, but also, just like anything we saw with the pandemic, all of the things when people are like, oh, well, we can't do that, it takes too much work. All of a sudden, when you have to, you can't figure it out. And that's, really how we've approached this with whether it's an event location is, there's no one size fits all. What do you need? What works for you? Right. Sometimes the barrier can be that they don't have cold storage. They don't have, so if they package, take this extra food and put it in their cold storage, they don't have enough space for their next event. Okay. So you need to pick up every day. Is that what it would take? They don't want to cover the to-go costs, the to-go containers. So
that's what I had in April. Yeah.
Okay, how much would that cost? And then let's look at what the tax benefits are for you, because there's an enhanced tax benefit for donating this food. So, but also that's a situation where would you like to ask, the event, whoever's organizing the event. We've seen caterers just say, well, if you want us to take care of it, we'll charge you $25, and that'll cover the costs of the materials. The other main piece is that this is just not what we do. This isn't how we've trained our team. And I think what we have found is for those event locations who took the time to retrain their team. So instead of at the end of the event, all of this stuff that's still in these pans and it's completely fine, instead of the process being we just throw it in the garbage, the process now is we put that in the fridge and we label it and put something on it, and I think that's what's been probably the best part for me is the staff who have to throw this food away. They don't want to. That does not feel good, but it's also not likely that they're letting them take it home either. That's sometimes for me, the biggest thing is we've had plenty of hotels who have said, we don't recover, but we let our staff have it. Okay, as long as someone's eating the food, that's my biggest concern. But if you're not going to let staff eat it and you're just going to throw it in the garbage,
right?
I'm not okay with that. And so we've really seen for these places where, for example, the convenience store that was doing it, how proud the staff felt about participating in food recovery. They were really excited to feel like they were playing a part in helping their neighbors, and they knew, and a lot of people had personal connections to where the food was going. And they just really felt that sense of pride of being able to do something that felt good, because nobody feels good. None of us were raised being like, oh, well, I didn't drink this milk and it's unopened, so I just should throw it in the garbage. Like that's not how we do
unless it
anymore.
Smells horrible.
Yeah, if it doesn't look good or smell good. But I think of my girls when they go to school, they have to take certain things with their lunch. It's not, and at the end, if you didn't eat it, we don't put it, they're not allowed to put it back. They just are throwing it away. So, I think a lot of it comes down to changing your processes. And so some of that can be if you don't have a relationship set up to know, someone's going to come pick it up, that can seem daunting, but it's all completely figure outable. I have a sign behind me that says that. And that's really where, like I say, food rescue, it's a relationship. It should be a win-win situation. No one should feel like they're being, it should be something that everyone, once you get, change is never fun. No one likes change, but once you've done it, it's done and you don't have to do it again. So why don't you just change your processes one time instead of having to continue to do it only when your client asks? It's much easier if you can say, you take control. Here's what we do. Here's how this works. That's one of our largest event centers locally. That's the best part, is that when people go there and they're like, okay, well, they're worried about asking, and that location can say, we already do it. That's already part of our business. And that's something that sets them apart. And it's a real, benefit, because then they can also talk about it at their event about how anything not enjoyed during the event, here's what's going to happen to it. So, I get it. It's not that it's something super, it's not a snap of your fingers and it's done. However, it is just like anything else. Once you change the processes, then you just have to implement. And I think you'll find there's a lot more people who want to help that be successful than there are who don't want it to be successful.
Well, and I want to jump in. Nancy put a question. She did say, my friend Nancy posted in here that it is hard for them, but she did have a question for you. The 250 areas in which they distribute, are these local locations pantries, homebound clients, or both? She's a volunteer for a local food pantry.
So we right now aren't doing anything with homebound clients. We do deliver to community refrigerators. So like I've mentioned, there's around 40 of those locally, but we take food to food pantries. We take food to schools. We take food to libraries, are a lot of it. We always take food to organizations. So we're not serving any people directly, but I know one of the group that we work with, Food Rescue Hero, they actually, because of the software that we're using, they have extended into being able to take food to homebound individuals. So that's definitely on the horizon. But right now, our organizations, we actually have 80% of the places that we're taking food to aren't eligible to order from our local Feeding America food bank. So I always kind of talk about them, that they sit outside of that traditional top of mind, when people are thinking about where food can go. It's our, big pantries and the homeless shelters and, some of those places. They're not thinking of Ronald McDonald House or the Boys and Girls Club or the schools. So, that's really the part where our focus for any of the places that we're taking food is, are people there? Would they eat it? You should have it.
Well, and that reminds me. So on our DOMS board here in North Carolina, we were talking about an organization that's similar to a Ronald McDonald House, and it's for families and individuals who are going through chemo and or their families are coming to visit the patients going through chemo. And so we as DOMS are going to cook meals for 60 people, once a month. Right. And but that food that you're talking about and rescuing actually could be part of that. Right?
100%, and having, and that's really where, depending on the location, if there's I had a child in the NICU when my oldest, she was in the NICU for a week, and they just had a fridge in the break room, and it was, or in this, like the room where parents could be, and there was just food in there. And it was just for people to eat. And that helped me feel loved and cared for. And that's really what we want anyone who we're taking this food to have that same feeling. You don't have to do anything for this food. It is here, and you're actually doing us a favor by eating it. We want to, it's not going in the garbage, and it's helping, make sure that you feel better. So that's kind of the best part of all of this is, we'll take food to where people are. And then the nice part with some of those kinds of freezer meals for some of the schools, for example, we've also purchased microwaves so that, kids you can warm it up, because they're not the best. The corn dogs that we rescued from some of our convenience stores, I can tell you from experience, they're not great cold. Not good. Right. So you should warm it up. Warm it up.
Some food is definitely that way.
Yeah.
So there's a story from an event planner who was, she went to her venue and they said, no, we can't do this. But then she went and found the partner, and now that partner and that partner in that venue are now partners, right? Because they now have changed their systems, like you said, which I love. So one of the things that I asked you, what are some best practices, in doing this? So from the event planner perspective, what questions are, how can they plan ahead to do this? And then what questions should they be asking of the venues as well as of a donor partner?
Yeah. So
receiver,
when you are planning the event, I think, we're actually going to be doing our first wedding show here in a couple. I'm very excited about it. Because again, that's where, when you are setting it up. So when you are talking to the event location, just ask them, how do you handle food recovery? What is your process? Do you have a separate storage, a fridge? Is it food? Do you have a place where it can be stored overnight and picked up the next day? Or do you need everything that's going to be recovered to move that day? And I always like to present my questions as, we're going to be doing this. I'm just going to ask you, how does it work best from your side? Not can we do it, but we're planning on doing it. What do you need to make this be successful? So asking about the storage capacity is a big question, because that can be a challenge. And then asking about the to-go materials. Do they provide the foil pans, or do they need the foil? Do you need to provide the foil pans? Are they able to, whoever is it the catering company, are they able to package the food into the to-go containers, or do you need someone else to do that kind of part? So just kind of getting into those like details of, do you have the space? Do you have the materials and the equipment? And then who's going to do the like physical part of it? And then it comes to the day of the event. And that's really where, the other side of it is, once you know that the food, here's what it is. And, always know going in, there will be extra, no matter what anyone says, there's going to be extra. So that's okay. If it's 10 meals or if it's 100 meals, those are valuable, both of them. So at the same time, then it is talking to where the food's going to go. Are they able to pick it up that evening? We've actually picked up quite a lot of food from funeral homes, because they have, just think of like, there's visitations and there's always so much food. And we've had many of them, whether it's a church or, another facility, they're kind enough, they'll just store it in their fridge overnight and we can pick it up the next day. So, asking just some of those questions, I think about, where can it go? And I'm going to a wedding on Friday, and I've been talking with the wedding planner about it. And this is kind of what we talked about was, do you have space there at the venue to store it? Or should we have volunteers that come and pick it up that evening? And since I'm there, I'll be the volunteer.
So you're actually an attendee at the event, and you reached out to the wedding planner and said, I want to rescue the leftover food.
Oh, of course.
Aubrey, I love you.
I talked to the bride first, of course. And I was like, so what's happening with your extra food? So you should know, anytime you invite me to your event, I will be asking what's going to happen.
Love that.
Yeah. I am that person. And that was, there's been plenty of times where people are like, we can't figure it out. I'm like, okay, that's fine for now. I'll be back. I'm going to talk to you about how we can do this next time, and that's where it's about relationships. It's about being able to say, here's what our plan is. And if something goes left, that's okay. We just need to be able to talk about it and figure it out. There have been times where someone was planning on, they packaged everything up and they put it in the fridge, and then it disappeared and it ended up in the garbage. Okay. That's unfortunate, but let's talk. What happened? Did we forget to label it? Should it have been somewhere different? All of those things are completely able to be overcome. It's just having the talk beforehand about where's it going, or, where are we storing it? How are we storing it? How is it packaged? And then who's picking it up or delivering it afterwards, and so that's the part where, depending on your location, who are the groups that could use it? And if you don't have an organization that focuses on food recovery, being able to talk to some of the places that food can go, and kind of seeing how you can also work that on their side. Because it might be that, like I said, transportation is the biggest challenge there. So sometimes working through that can take some time, but hopefully once you start the relationship, then it's good.
Right. Well, and it's figuring out it's even with that event I did in April, it's like figuring out when can the chef in the venue do that, because of how many events they're planning. And then when can that picker upper person, come and get it. And it is that logistics and then the equipment and all of that. Right.
Yeah.
So, and when can that, and if the hotel or venue is not providing the equipment to do that, when can it get delivered to the venue to be then used for that? Right. So
we've really talked with some places and are trying, one of the locations we pick, it's an event location, and they have 3, 5, 10 events a week. And they don't actually prepare any of the food on site. They have a commercial kitchen space, but caterers come in and, bring the food there. And what they've done is they have a huge commercial refrigerator that they've just dedicated as their recipe.
Wow.
And so they just tell every caterer who comes there and every person who's planning an event is, here's the fridge where you put it, so that you can have separate locations so that you don't get mixed up of like, is this supposed to be getting served? Is this for the next group or is this extra? Because, so that's been huge. And for us to be able to, we've talked about, could we just make like a food rescue package? So it has containers. It has, one thing that I forget, and I've been doing this for a long time, are labels.
That's what I was going to ask you about.
Labels and Sharpie markers are, those are key. But usually I'll just end up writing on the plastic container because, the big aluminum pans, I think, are what is common in the event space. And those can definitely go somewhere. We've tried to take it a little farther where we can. So if we're going to be repackaging the food, could we repackage it into meals instead of a pan of, 50 chicken breasts? Could we turn it into meals? So that does take extra work. But for the locations that works, it's been an incredible, because that food can go so many more places than, the ones that can take a pan of chicken. It's a lot more limited.
Right. Well, and with staffing shortages right now in the events industry, that I think that would be definitely a challenge for that.
Yeah.
So it is making sure that you communicate with the team on what are your capabilities at this moment.
Exactly. And that's not something that the staff does. I should be clear too. That's something we do, or the volunteers do. Really, the staff's only responsibility is to take the food from where it was, if it was out, out or being served, and then put it where it's, put it back in the fridge, whichever fridge it's going to be, and make sure that it's labeled, that this is for donation, this is when it was prepared and this is what it was. And that doesn't have to happen immediately. That can be stuff that's done at the end, but, that's really the staff's biggest thing is, instead of throwing that food in the garbage, just put it in another fridge if, possible.
So your staff is coming on site to that event venue and then repackaging the food.
Volunteers are. So, or sometimes it's me, it's me, or we have a staff of 2. So it could be us. We've actually talked with, schools, our location, where we asked some of the food and nutrition director, what would it cost if we just paid your staff for, another hour to do it? Would that be possible? So for some of those places, those are the kinds of questions and things that, if that's all that's holding it up, then let's talk about it. How can we figure that out? But I think, some of these things, each location and each venue has different challenges and needs. So let's just talk about it, and I think if we're all coming from a place of we want to figure this out versus I'm going to just keep throwing up things that are barriers and you're going to have to keep knocking them down. I think that sometimes, there are definitely locations here who we have been talking to for years and they have zero desire to do anything different. Okay. Wow. I have zero desire to ever refer people to do an event at your location. It's really becoming something for us that we want to promote and lift up those who have the same values, those locations who do value sustainability and making sure that, resources are valued and people are fed. So there's enough choice in our area that we're going to help, promote those who are willing to take the extra step to make sure that, they're kind of doing right by their clients.
Okay. So that brings me to another thing. So how many times do you go back to that same organization before you give up and say, I'm not going to work with you? Because there is a lot of that pushback.
Well, since I'm not planning events very often, I don't have to worry about that. If people invite me to their event, that's usually what happens, is that I'm like, oh, we're here again. All right, I'll try again. I will always ask again. And we've really seen too, after the pandemic, there were some that were doing an incredible job, but we know that the hospitality industry has been, devastated with the pandemic. And so there's been a lot of staff changes and turnover. For some of these, we just have to come back and say, okay, like how do we reset this up? Or staff changed and, someone who wasn't on board with it, now they're there. So I'll ask every time. I'll always ask. But I'll also be honest when people ask me, who do you work with? And, where would you recommend we have an event? I'll tell you honestly, here's who we work with. Here's who makes it easy. And if you're going to have your event at one of these places that it's not going to make it easy, that's okay. Maybe you're the person this time by asking, it's one of those, you have to ask like 10 times or something before someone maybe changes their mind. That's really been the biggest thing for us because we're so small. This wedding show that we're going to do, I'm really excited about that because I think really what's going to move the needle with whether it's event venues or caterers is having a lot of people ask. I don't think they want to keep saying no to a bunch of people. So really, if we just keep asking, eventually we're like, ugh, fine, we'll just do it because this lady is very annoying. So tenacity.
That would be me too. Yeah. Okay. So I think we could just keep talking because I just realized we've been talking for 50 minutes. Wow. So I have two things. Rebuilding our current, we talked about it briefly at the very beginning, but rebuilding our current food system that works for everyone. And that's not, this is one piece of that, right?
Yeah.
And
this is one piece.
Yeah. And it can be a piece that actually can help foster change, correct?
It is. I think really what boggles my brain is right now, we're talking about how everything is so expensive and there's all this inflation and food is included in that. That hasn't stopped the amount of food that we're throwing away. So how do you have at the same time we're throwing away and we're like, oh, this food is so much more expensive. We have to charge more for it. But we're going to just continue to throw a bunch of it in the garbage. Like that doesn't make sense in my brain because we're putting money over people, and so that's really where I think we do have to hold more people accountable to say, we're just not okay with this anymore. Like maybe we didn't know that you were doing it before. I always kind of tell people when you're in a grocery store and you see someone with the staff who's coming out with the grocery cart and they're putting, the fresh cut fruits and vegetables is usually what really throws me over the edge. And they're putting it on the grocery cart. Ask them what's happening with that. Because generally they're taking that grocery cart to the back and throwing it in the garbage. If we saw grocery store staff taking food off the shelf and just putting it in a garbage can, we'd be ticked.
Right.
But they're smart enough to know we're not going to do that. That's why I feel like that's a big part of why it's been allowed to continue for so long is people don't see it. We don't see the waste that's happening all the time. And so it's easy, I think I just assumed the best. I thought that why would anyone do that? And I think unfortunately money is why people do it because we're also talking about, we're just going to let people we have enough food. We're just going to let them have this stuff that you're going to throw away, have it for free. We get that a lot as well. If you just, why would a business donate to you? Because, that's going to cut down on their sales. Well, the people who we're giving this food to weren't going to buy that anyway. Like they didn't have $5 to go spend on a burrito. So, I think that kind of where our values lie and do we care more about, all the resources and all the stuff that went into producing this food? Do we value that enough to make sure that it meets its end purpose and gets to be consumed? Or are we okay with kind of the way things are right now? Whereas that is the commonplace, again, that's the part where if we can rebuild the food system, that if we saw someone, 5-10 years from now, saw someone just throwing, packages of completely good food in the garbage, that would be, we don't do that here. But right now we're like,
yeah, we do.
That's unfortunate.
40% of the food is wasted.
It's ridiculous. Here in Iowa, they've always they do a waste study, an waste audit. And so organic waste has always been a category. Organic waste is now our highest waste stream, and food is a big part of it. That's not, I think people always consider food rescue and food, they think of trash cans. We want it before it ends up in the trash can. There'll be plenty of the ends of, food and compostable stuff. Right. All of that stuff will still be there. I'm talking about the stuff that's still in its original packaging. That's the whole pieces of fruit. That's what we want. And, just getting that portion of food is enough to feed everybody in our community. Right. And, still have plenty of work to do with, organic waste.
Well, then that's an opportunity for new jobs and then when you feed somebody that actually teach a man to fish, right? That thing. But when you feed them as well, it gives them the energy to potentially go out and learn how to fish, and gives them that, that care that you mentioned earlier. It's like, we care about you, and so we're going to feed you. And I think that adds to that so much.
Yeah. It's really hard to do anything well when you're hungry. But none of us do well when we're hungry. So, there's a lot of these things when we're talking about you need to do X, Y, and Z. I think at the base of it is you need to have food, you need to have shelter, and you need to be cared, have your health needs taken care of. Then we can keep talking about the rest of it, and all those things are important. But I think food is the basis for everybody. And really the main thing I want people, we have it. We have plenty of it. We're just not taking care of it and making sure that it gets to the people who need it. We take all this time when you look at supply chain and all these different pieces and parts that make sure that food gets to where it's going. And then we just kind of let it go. We're like, okay, well, our work here is done. And now our only option is the landfill. It's not. I don't know exactly what that looks like. I think that's been a big part of this is everyone's like, well, how do you do it? I don't know. But I know that we have enough smart, capable, competent people around the world. I don't know how trash hauling got started. It got started, and look at it now. We can create new systems to manage some of these things that we haven't been able to right now. But it takes investment and it takes wanting to do it. And unfortunately, there has not been the collective will to do it right now. And that's why it's fallen on nonprofits to do all of this work. And it is work. So, there are good jobs to be had, but we have to spend some energy and time putting that together. So until then, you're going to have people like me all right, I'll figure it out. But, it'd be nice if we could get some other, bigger folks in there who have a lot of resources and infrastructure to do this more.
Oh my gosh, so much to unpack there and so much work to do. So I appreciate what you do. Just to kind of wrap this up with the context of what the podcast is about is, what does a safe, sustainable, and inclusive food and beverage experience look like to you?
Really for me, I think it's always about how I leave the event. Did I leave the event feeling, good? Did I feel seen? Did I feel cared for? Did I have my needs met? I have a daughter who has a peanut allergy, and I have friends who are, gluten-free or vegetarian, vegan. Did we all get to come and enjoy the event and not get served just a chopped in half iceberg lettuce because that's all that's as far as we could go for you? I want everyone who leaves the event to feel, that they were a part of it. They were actually included and they were considered, and they aren't the outsider or the other. That's really what making sure everyone who's there feels like they're part of it and that your needs were considered. That's something I think that I don't know. I know that there's a lot of work that goes into that. And I think that's why when you've experienced it, and you also know when you have it. And, that's really where I rely on the people who do that full time to know all those little pieces make a really big difference to someone who's attending.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you, Aubrey. Everybody, you can reach out to Aubrey with Eat Greater Des Moines at eatgreaterdesmoines.org. You can find her on LinkedIn as well. I don't think I have that link here, but here is her Instagram and handle here at Eat Greater Des Moines as well. So thank you for what you do. I really appreciate it. And
I love it. I love what I get to do. I'm really, really privileged to get to go and do this work. And, that's why it's fun. Who doesn't want to go to, fun events and then get extra food?
Right.
So fun.
Well, and I think that makes it not a job. That makes it, you love to come to work and do that. So I appreciate that. And so do everybody that you feed. So yes. Until next time, stay safe and eat well. Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Eating at a Meeting podcast, where every meal matters. I'm Tracy Stuckrath, your food and beverage inclusion expert. Call me and let's get started right now on creating safe and inclusive food and beverage experiences for your customers, your employees, and your communities. Share the podcast with your friends and colleagues at our Eating at a Meeting Facebook page and on all podcast platforms. To learn more about me and receive valuable information, go to tracystuckrath.com. And if you'd like more information on how to feed engagement, nourish inclusion, and bolster your bottom line, then visit eatingatameeting.com.